What's up, guys? So today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 tier 4 ability upgrades that everyone gets wrong. So let's get into it. Alright, so today we're taking a look at the top 10 tier 4 ability upgrades that everyone gets wrong. We're back again using Mantis, and Mantis is a third-party overlay that works on top of any Android emulator running Marvel Strike Force, and it shows you some interesting statistics. So I'll put a link to Mantis in the video description below. But yeah, it provides you a bunch of useful information, so you can see here what percentage of players who have their rosters or roster information saved to MSF.gg, what percentage went with each ISO class for a character, how many users did a given tier 4 ability upgrade. And so we were combing through this and we found some interesting stuff. For example, 21 users have done the tier 4 ability upgrade for Shield Operative Special, which is very confusing because that does a flat 300 healing. Now that said, we do realize that T4s are sparse and not everyone has all the T4s they'd like to upgrade certain abilities, so only a certain percentage of the player base is going to have a given T4 upgrade because they're just not that plentiful. However, for the purposes of this list, what we're looking at are instances where, on a given character, abilities that we feel are a lower priority than other more important ones have been upgraded, which says that the players did have tier 4 ability materials that they could devote to the character, and they just didn't go with the right tier 4 upgrade in our opinion. Having said that, let's jump into the list. Coming in at number 10, Jessica Jones. So as you can see here, looking at the percentage of players who've upgraded a given T4 ability, what we found interesting here was that the Jessica Jones passive was done by so many more players than the Jessica Jones ultimate. And this just doesn't make that much sense. The passive gives 10% resistance to the entire team, and 10% resistance is not a crazy amount. It's very rarely the make or break amount, and she's already giving her team a very good amount of additional resistance. While occasionally this can make the difference of a positive effect or a negative effect on a given character, her ult is pretty much always going to make a significant difference in terms of the effects that it's going to remove. In addition to giving it 50% damage, which is not particularly important, this ability is backed by 100,000% extra focus, and it is going to, instead of clearing 3 positive effects, clear all positive effects. And that's really, really big in a lot of scenarios. It's really, really big against a Cull Obsidian who happens to have a regen. It's really big against a Colossus that happens to have a defense up. It's really big against a Juggernaut that happens to have an immunity. And it's also just really important against any character with more than 3 positive effects when you're trying to strip one buff in particular. So for example, if there's a taunting Thanos and you really, really need to remove his taunt and immunity so that you can hit him with some debuffs or a stun or a blind, something like that, you don't want to strip the wrong 3 positive effects and then not be able to land your stuff. So her ultimate is a definite big game changer compared to just 10% resistance. Kind of baffling. So that is why we have Jessica Jones at the number 10 spot. Coming in at number 9, Mysterio. As you can see here, a good amount of players have done the Mysterio passive, but nowhere near as many players have done the Mysterio ultimate. And again, this is pretty confusing. If you look at what the Mysterio passive does, it does give him an additional 5% focus per Spider-Verse ally. So at most, it's another 25% focus. And it's also giving potentially another 25% focus for his Spider-Verse allies. And then in War, on death, he'll summon an additional mirror image, and those mirror images will do slightly more damage. So first off, something that's restricted only to War isn't as important. And the mirror image damage is already incredibly negligible, so that's mostly irrelevant. So the main reason to do this is the focus. Now, that's not a terrible reason to do this. Focus is important, and you definitely want him landing his control effects in the first place. However, there's really only a couple control effects that it's really, really important that he land. And those are mostly located in the ult, where if you don't upgrade it, he's definitely going to fail to apply them, because the chance to not apply them is built into the T4 upgrade, which we'll talk about in just a sec. But so the additional focus is not terrible. This isn't necessarily a bad upgrade, and we're not saying that people should not have upgraded this. What we are saying is that it's interesting how few people have not upgraded the ultimate ability, which goes from heal blocking 2 random enemies to heal blocking all enemies. That heal block is absolutely massive, in addition to the fact that it's also a plus 60% damage on an ability that he's almost always going to use when he has offense up. But forgetting that, Heal blocks are absolutely crucial for so many matchups. Pretty much all of the prime matchups for the Sinister Six to take in war are dependent on landing those heal blocks to stop your opponents from healing. So worrying about whether or not he has the focus to land the heal blocks is a bit of a waste when you're not bothering to make sure that he's going to try to heal block everyone on the field. So this should definitely be a higher priority, and for that reason, Mysterio is number 9. Coming in at number 8, Rescue. So I didn't want to focus too much on just calling out upgrades that people shouldn't have done. After all, what's done is done. They can't exactly go back and change it. However, in this particular instance, I did want to call it out because, as you can see, a lot of players have done the Rescue passive. And the Rescue passive is currently the 3rd most popular Tier 4 ability upgrade on the Power Armor team. And this is just kind of mind-boggling. It does very, very little for the team. We're going to talk about another Power Armor ability upgrade right after this, but I do want to call attention to this one. It is providing 500 barrier, and then in war, an additional 5% max health as barrier, and then an additional 5% max health, as well as giving the entire Power Armor team an additional 5% max health. Now that might seem like a good idea, but Power Armor are pretty much all about their damage output, not so much their survivability. So that's the first thing, is you're better off investing a T4 in your Power Armor that will actually allow them to blow someone up, rather than hoping that they can survive an onslaught and the match will go very late. But more importantly, if you do want to invest in their defense, get good value out of that investment. 5% and 500 flat barrier is just not a lot. A fully maxed, we're talking a gear tier 15, level 80, 7 red star, fully decked out Rescue, as big as she could possibly be, is going to get about 13.5 thousand additional health out of that barrier, and 13.5 thousand health out of that extra max health. And that's roughly what you're going to get on any given member of the Power Armor team. It is a very, very negligible amount of health, when for pretty much any endgame content, the standard basic attack is going to do like 50 to 60,000 damage. So adding an additional 13,000, and again, that's on a fully maxed Power Armor team, it's just terrible value. So wanted to call this one out. Definitely not worth doing this upgrade. All right, coming in at number 7, Ironheart. This is why I was okay talking about that Rescue ability, because I wanted to kind of rope that in with Ironheart's abilities, and that, as you can see, a lot of players have done the Ironheart passive, and nowhere near as many players have done the Ironheart ultimate. Let's take a look at what these do. The Ironheart passive is going to give, again, an additional 5% max health and an additional 5% armor, as well as 10% resistance, self and tech allies. And again, if you want your Power Armor to be more effective, tiny, tiny little improvements like that. Ironheart has less health than Rescue. So tiny improvements like that, you're barely helping their survivability. I mean, if your Power Armor characters are literally living or dying, and it's making the difference in winning the match by 13,000 health, and again, that would be on a fully maxed Power Armor where you wouldn't even run into that, it just ends up being an amount of damage that you're pretty much never going to save them from anything. It almost never comes up that an ability that would have killed someone was just a couple thousand damage short. It's just very unlikely. So it's doing very little for them in terms of their survivability, and it's basically making massive sacrifices in terms of their ability to actually just blow their opponents up. For example, if we look at the Ironheart ult, she's gaining an extra 100,000% extra focus in war when she uses this, in addition to it doing an extra 30% damage, and it's pretty much always going to have offense up, so really good damage. But in addition to that, it is going to apply offense down for 2 turns instead of 1. That is an entire extra round of defense downs, so that anyone that you hadn't finished off with the 2-turn wombo combo, you're going to be able to finish off. And if you're using Power Armor properly, a lot of times you're going to have Iron Man's ult ready on turn 3. So being able to use an offense up Iron Man ult into a defense down that is still around is going to be really, really impactful. Not to mention that a lot of the other control effects that they have are much easier to land into a defense downed opponent. So if you want to land that offense down from a War Machine basic or the slow from a Rescue basic, you want to do that into a defense downed enemy, and it just makes them so much easier to clean up, especially some of the tankier members who might be able to heal as the fight goes on. So you just get so much more bang for your buck with this T4, and that is why Ironheart is in the number 7 spot. Coming in at number 6, Proxima Midnight. So This one might be a little bit controversial, but we're pretty confident in being able to say this. And that is, if you look, her most popular tier 4 ability upgrade seems to be her basic. And I understand why people like the basic, but it is nowhere near as impactful as her ultimate ability. So we found that kind of confusing, so definitely want to talk about this. So the Proxima Midnight basic is going to add 40% damage to the primary target, which is not a crazy amount of damage. Sometimes she does have offense up, so it can be a moderate amount of damage, but it's definitely not going to be make or break in terms of a battle. And then it's always gain an assist from an ally Corvus Glaive. So I understand the allure here. That's a good amount of extra damage that you're going to get, but that's not going to show up until turn 3. What's going to make the match play out rather differently is the ultimate. The ultimate is going to, in addition to doing an additional 40% piercing, so you're still getting the damage at least on that ability, you are also going to reduce the speed bar of the character by another 25%, ultimately rewinding them 50%, and you're also stunning them and slowing them. So they're already losing a full turn from the stun, and then because they're slowed, that additional 25% speed bar is actually worth half of a turn, and you were already rewinding them 25%. So by rewinding them half a turn, but also slowing them, you are costing them another full turn in addition to the turn that they're skipping by being stunned. Taking someone out of commission for that much longer is really big, and depending on the character, having them stunned prevents so many passives from going off in that time. For example, if you have Black Bolt stunned for longer and one of your characters gets dropped to red health, they're safe because Black Bolt is still stunned and cannot actually hit them with his passive to take them out. There are a ton of instances where this comes up, where having someone stunned is very important because they cannot make use of their passive ability. And that tends to be worth a lot more than the little bit of damage and the occasional extra dispel that you get. And again, remember, even if you don't have this T4, you're still going to get that assist about half the time. But at the end of the day, I've been using my Black Order for a lot of content, and I have never found that I ended up in a situation where I needed the Proxima and or Corvus basic to make the difference in winning the match. Even though the value is decent, that team has so many tools for dealing with positive effects and dealing significant amounts of damage that the basics really don't come up. Not to mention that if you were going to do a basic, the Corvus basic is a better value because you tend to run him as a striker, whereas you're going to have Proxima as a skirmisher. So if you want to get the most out of that combo and go for the triple tap, even then it makes sense to ultimately upgrade the Corvus basic more so than the Proxima basic. But yeah, the ult is just an absolute game changer and should definitely be a higher priority. Coming in at number 5, Black Widow. So what's interesting about Black Widow is a lot of players seem to have done the Black Widow passive. Nowhere near as many players seem to have done the Black Widow special. And the Black Widow special is an absolute game changer. But we'll take a look at the passive first, because again, a lot of players have done this. And don't get me wrong, I love speed. Anything that involves speed manipulation, granting extra speed, tends to make a big deal. However, this is only 5% speed, and while, again, the Black Widow passive is not by any means a bad upgrade, it is nowhere near as impactful as the Black Widow special, which we're about to talk about. As for the assist, similar to what we just discussed with Proxima and Corvus, half the time, Widow is going to gain an assist from Hawkeye anyway, so this is good for an extra little bit of damage. However, Hawkeye's assist doesn't really contribute anything extra besides a little bit of damage, so not getting that assist isn't the biggest deal for this team. So again, it's not that this is a bad upgrade, it's that it certainly shouldn't be a more important upgrade than the special. So if we look at the special, putting the T4 in the Black Widow special makes it so that whenever she uses her special, what she's going to do as soon as she gets her first turn, and then every couple of turns thereafter, sometimes even more frequently because she can get ability energy from Captain America, she's going to remove a negative effect from an Avenger ally. There are just so many instances where removing a single negative effect, and keep in mind that's off of every character. There's so many instances where removing that negative effect makes a huge difference. If there was a disrupt on Hulk or Captain America, it can make a big difference in terms of what positive effects they can gain. It might allow Captain America to taunt. She's removing a blind from someone like Thor so that his passive can land or his ult can actually stun people. Removing an offense down or a defense down from someone, removing a slow. There's just so many really game-changing opportunities for this ability to remove a negative effect that's going to be massively impactful. I also want to mention that the Black Widow special is really, really good when using Wave 1 on offense and war, particularly in debuff rooms like in Reactor or in Security. As soon as she uses that ability, the first thing it's going to do is remove a negative effect. So clearing a bunch of disrupts or clearing a bunch of defense downs can absolutely make the difference in winning or losing a match in war. The reason that we have Black Widow on this list is because while the passive is good, special is amazing. Coming in at number 4, Mystique. As you can see here, a lot of players have done the Mystique passive. It seems to be her most popular. However, nowhere near as many players have done the Mystique special. This is a very big oversight. So we'll start by looking at the passive. The passive is not that critical. It does a couple things. In war specifically, war defense specifically, it is going to allow Mystique to always assist on non-attack abilities. And that's nice. She normally has I believe a 50% chance to assist on non-attack abilities without that. But at the end of the day, her assists don't contribute a lot to the match. So it is some extra damage. It's not a terrible upgrade. The always gaining evade on spawn can be a big deal, but a lot of times she's not targeted. She tends to go into stealth fairly quickly into the match. It's not that big of a deal. That said, the special is a very big deal, particularly on the Marauders, which is half the case for even doing her passive in the first place. If you look at what the T4 does on the special, in addition to doing an extra 30% damage to primary and secondary targets, which is just whatever, it is going to attack 3 additional targets that do not have stealth, so effectively it's going to hit more targets. But then, most importantly, if Mr. Sinister is an ally, it is going to flip, instead of 1, 2 positive effects to negative effects. So not only is it going to literally hit more people, but it is also going to flip more positive effects to negative effects on every target. This is really, really big. We kind of touched on this when talking about Black Widow, but at the end of the day, a status effect, an individual status effect, can be an absolute game changer for the outcome of a match, and a flip is the most dramatic way to express that. Taking a character who had offense up and flipping that to an offense down went from them dealing an extra 50% damage to them dealing half damage. That is a dramatic reduction in their damage output. Flipping a speed up to a slow can just completely change the turn order of the enemy team and make them use abilities out of order. Changing a defense up to a defense down can provide the opportunity for someone to get burst out. There's just so many instances of this where a flip can be a total game changer. So not only flipping buffs on more targets, but flipping more positive effects on every target. This upgrade is absolutely massive and should definitely be a higher priority than the passive. For that reason, Mystique is on our list. Coming in at number 3, Yellow Jacket. So what's interesting about Yellow Jacket is, of course, he's fairly new, and so a lot of players haven't had an opportunity to put T4s into him just yet. But the interesting trend that seems to be emerging is that his basic ability seems to be the least popular. So there is at least a case for the ultimate and for the special, but the passive definitely should not be more popular. If you look at the passive, it's an additional 10% drain only when he has offense up. So it's not a big window, and it's not a crazy amount of healing. And he's on a team that gets a pretty good amount of healing, and he has the special that gets him a good amount of healing anyway. And of course, he's going to get some drain when he's the ultimate. But specifically looking at the basic, I just want to kind of call attention to what the basic does, because the special is mostly only important for Dark Dimension. It is an additional 10% health steal, unless you're hitting just a truly gargantuan tank or a Dark Dimension 4 character that has a giant health bar. That health steal is actually not a tremendous amount of additional damage. And as for the ult, again, the ult can be important in certain situations, but in my opinion, it's got nothing on the basic. Both of his abilities are 5 energy cooldowns, so if you're running stature, you can shorten that a bit, but safe to say you're going to be doing at least as many basic attacks as you are any other abilities, if not more. On his own, you're definitely doing 3 basics to every 2 special abilities. And as far as the basic, it is going to add 70% damage to the primary attack and then another 70% damage to the bonus attack. That is an extra 140% damage on every basic attack. Not to mention that he gets called for assists a ton on his team between him and Ant-Man, and so it'll also, of course, improve the damage that he's doing with those assists. And if he has offense up, he's also going to drain and heal himself considerably more with all the extra damage that he's doing. But in short, while you can make a case for which ability should be ahead of others, we can very safely say that the basic ability should not be the least popular one, and is adding 140% more damage to every basic attack, of which he's going to be doing fairly often. So for that reason, Yellow Jacket is number 3 on the list. Coming in at number 2, Minerva. So again, I wanted to stay away from having too many inclusions on this list where we're basically just shaming people for upgrades that they've done. I'm sure everyone watching this has done at least one regrettable upgrade where they didn't quite understand what they were getting, or they were kind of new to the game, or whatever it was, and in hindsight would definitely refund it. But this one was just so egregious that I definitely wanted to put it on here. And that is that more than 1 in 5 players have done the Minerva Ultimate. And this is just madness. So if you look at what the Minerva Ultimate does, it adds an additional plus 1,000 health and flat healing. Plus 1,000 health. That's it. Now, if you really want to get technical, it also increases the damage of the bleeds that she applies by 15%. So you've slightly, ever so slightly, increased the damage output of her ult, but it's very negligible. She's not putting out a ton of damage anyway, but mainly you're getting the flat 1,000 health, which is pretty much inconsequential. My Minerva is by no means maxed out. My Minerva has 369,838 health. I have gear pieces that give her more health than this tier 4 ability upgrade. Do not do this. And finally, coming in at number 1, Venom. So there's a lot to say about Venom, but really I want to dwell on the fact that what we feel is one of his most important tier 4 ability upgrades, Ultimate, seems to be the least popular tier 4 ability upgrade on his kit, according to players. And I suspect that this is because a lot of players don't fully understand the value in this ability. So we'll get to it in just a sec, but I want to talk about a few other things. So if we're looking at his passive, it gives him an extra 5% max health heal on turn, and that's certainly not bad, but it's definitely not as important as his ultimate, which we'll get to. And yeah, at the end of the day, 5% healing, it's not bad, but this team does a pretty good job of healing themselves. You can definitely make up for that by having someone the healer ISO class on the team. It does not have to urgently be purchased with T4 ability upgrades. As for the basic is going to simply add 50% more damage, and it is going to add 15% more damage to the bleeds that get applied if he flips a positive effect that becomes a bleed. Now, the best case that I've heard for upgrading his basic is you can run him as a striker for additional buff flips, and so hitting harder with the bonus attack is, I guess, another benefit of this, but it's not a significant amount of additional damage. And while Venom is by no means a bad striker, I only sometimes run Venom as a striker because Anti-Venom, his teammate, is one of the best strikers in the entire game. And so I don't want Venom consuming vulnerables that could have been consumed by Anti-Venom. But again, the reason he's on this list is because people are really neglecting his ult. And again, if we're looking at dealing significant damage, that is all in his ult. Let's take a look. Firstly, it is going to add an additional 50% damage to the primary target, as well as an additional 40% damage to the adjacent targets. You're already getting pretty much the same value as landing a bunch of basic attacks just off of the flat damage. But what's more important is, as we kind of referenced in his basic and when we talked about the Minerva ult, when you upgrade the level of an ability that applies bleeds, you are also increasing the damage dealt by those bleeds by, in this case, going from 6 to 7, 15%. However, what's interesting about this is that this is going to spread all negative effects. And so a lot of times you're going to be using this after you have a target that is loaded up with a lot of bleeds. Even if you are just basically doing this right after the opening rotation, where you're going to have, if nothing else, Carnage's ultimate, which I think will apply 3 bleeds, and then you have the Venom special, which is going to apply another 3 bleeds, and these are all 2 turns, and then Symbiote Spider-Man will go over the top and use his special and apply another bleed and extend all those bleeds to be 3 turns, so it's just so much more bleed damage. And then as soon as you're using this ultimate, you are sharing all of those bleeds with every nearby character, and every one of those bleeds is going to do an additional 15% damage, and that's every turn. And because a lot of these bleeds are going to be 3 turn, it is just so much damage. It is very, very common for this individual tier 4 ability upgrade to ultimately add somewhere in the neighborhood of like 150% more damage to each target that's getting hit by it, between the 50% or 40% flat, and then all the debuffs, and it is not uncommon to do even more than that. It is a massive, massive damage increase, and in my opinion, well justified over both the passive and the basic. And so for that reason, we wanted to make sure Venom was number 1 on this list. All right, so there you have it. That concludes our list of the top 10 tier 4 ability upgrades that everyone gets wrong. So if you guys enjoyed this video, we can definitely do another edition of it. If you want, we can do a version of it where we focus more on upgrades people did do that we feel that they shouldn't have. So definitely let me know in the comments. Also, if there are any upgrades that you think definitely needed to be on this list or that shouldn't have been on this list but were, again, please let me know that in the comments as well. That said though, that is all I've got for you today. Thank you guys very much for checking out this video. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and clean your bathroom, and I will see you guys real soon. Till next time. Peace!